Chapter 8:11. Her eyes were bloodshot as she looked at the two of them. You set me up? The high priest didn't say anything. Gu Shengyin continued. We set you up? Wrong. You were the one who set me up. Cheng Ling sneered. I did all this just to keep myself alive. What's wrong with that? Gu Shengyin looked at her and replied, I did all this just to keep my fifth sister alive. What's wrong with that? Cheng Ling sneered. Don't talk about sisterhood in front of me. If you really cared about Chang Lingyu, she wouldn't be living like that in the Protector General's manor. Gu Shengyin didn't answer the question. Instead, she said, It doesn't matter if I care about her or not. She's Cheng Linin's sister. I can't let some unknown monster take over her body. Cheng Ling knew that everything she had done during this period of time had been seen by the other party. What's more, the other party might have deliberately allowed her to get the Xian pill. She laughed. The winner takes all. Since I've lost today, I'll let you say whatever you want. She didn't say anything else and looked like she was at their disposal. Gu Shengyin didn't believe that Cheng Ling was someone who would give up so easily. Sure enough, the moment she relaxed a little, the woman suddenly dashed toward Chang Lingyu, who was lying on the bed. Cheng Ling knew that it was impossible for her to escape. She might as well take a gamble. Although the chances of success weren't high, what if she could return to Cheng Lingyu's body? They waited until now to deal with her because they weren't confident that they could expel her from Chang Lingyu's body under normal circumstances. However, she had underestimated the other person in the room. The high priest didn't even need to make a move. He just glanced at Cheng Ling's soul and she froze there, unable to move. The high priest ignored the frozen Cheng Ling and went to Cheng Lingyu's side in a flash. He bent down and glanced at the unconscious person. Then, he raised his hand and a misty light shot towards her body. I've already helped her stabilize her soul. She won't have to worry about being taken advantage of in the future, he told Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin knew that she was willing to do this because of her. She smiled and said, Thank you, teacher. Teacher? Cheng Ling finally knew who this man with a terrifying aura was. The rumored #1 expert of the Middle Continent, the unfathomable great consecrator of the Tianxian Empire. Indeed, it was not unjust for him to fall. She closed her eyes. In the end, she was still lacking. At this moment, Chang Lingyu, who had been unconscious all this time, opened her eyes groggily. She was still a little confused at this moment. When she looked around, she found herself in an unfamiliar environment with two people standing beside her. One of them was her big sister, who was high and mighty. As for the other, she only glanced at her briefly before hurriedly lowering her head. The moment she lowered her head, countless memories flooded into her mind like a tidal wave, causing her to feel a little absent-minded. What had happened during this period of time? She saw that a complete stranger had taken over her life, doing things that she didn't even dare to imagine before. Cheng Lingyu admitted that those days were far more exciting than living alone in the small courtyard of the Protector General's residence. However, that wasn't her. Chapter 8:12. That wasn't her. No matter how wonderful that person's life was, it had nothing to do with her or Cheng Lingyu. Cheng Lingyu's face paled as she understood everything. Of course, she had seen how Gu Shengyin and the man in white had helped her. She walked to Gu Shengyin and bowed deeply. Thank you for your help, big sister. She bowed to the high priest on the other side. Both of them accepted the gesture calmly. Gu Shengyin said gently, Fifth sister, would you like to meet the person who harmed you? Cheng Lingyu's expression froze. Then she nodded. Thank you, big sister. Gu Shengyin looked at the high priest, who then pointed at Cheng Lingyu with a finger. Cheng Lingyu felt as if her eyes were covered in frost and snow. She closed her eyes reflexively. When she opened her eyes again, she saw Cheng Lingyu, who was only a step away from her. Ah! Cheng Lingyu couldn't help but take a step back when a living person suddenly appeared in front of her. Then, she thought of something and carefully sized up the woman in front of her. She had short hair and wore strange clothes. Her arms, legs, and even her abdomen were exposed. Her face was resolute and bloodthirsty. Clearly, she wasn't an easy person to get along with. Why did you harm me? Cheng Lingyu mustered up her courage and asked. Cheng Lingyu sneered. Harm you? Tell me, what kind of life have you been living in that mansion? If you were me, you'd rather die early than live such a cowardly and unambitious life. Cheng Lingyu instinctively wanted to refute her, but she had always been a woman of few words. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Gu Shengyin couldn't stand such selfish words. She retorted, no matter how she lived, it's her own business. You're an outsider. What right do you have to judge someone else's life? You're just trying to find an excuse for your selfish behavior. She looked directly at Cheng Lingyu. Fifth sister, I asked you to meet her because I wanted to ask for your opinion. What do you plan to do with this person? What to do with her? Cheng Lingyu was a little confused. In fact, even if he did not do anything, Cheng Ling's soul would dissipate from this world sooner or later. However, Gu Shengyin wanted to see if her fifth sister could stand on her own 2 feet after going through such a thing. Yes, I'll give you the choice. What do you want to do with her? Cheng Lingyu bit her lip awkwardly. She had never made such a big decision before. Gu Shengyin waited patiently. The first step was always more difficult to take. After a long while, Cheng Lingyu finally spoke. Big sister, I don't want to let her go. There was a rare look of determination in her eyes. She wants to kill me. I can't tolerate it. Gu Shengyin smiled. Then, fifth sister, watch carefully. She glanced at the head consecrator, who nodded and waved his right sleeve. Cheng Ling's soul seemed to have suffered a huge impact and suddenly became distorted and blurry. She screamed shrilly, if I don't die, I'll make you pay with your blood. She looked so scary that Cheng Lingyu couldn't help but take 2 steps back. Gu Shengyin said indifferently, unfortunately, you won't have the chance. Cheng Ling's soul turned into ashes amidst the unwillingness and resentment. Gu Shengyin heaved a sigh of relief. No matter what, this huge threat was finally eliminated. Chapter 8:13. She turned to Cheng Ling, who was still in a daze, and asked, what are your plans for the future? Cheng Lingyu had successfully awakened and was able to cultivate mystical qi. She had the ability to protect herself. Moreover, her current identity was a headache, the second prince's concubine. All of this was the result of Cheng Ling's actions. But now, Cheng Lingyu had to bear all the consequences. Cheng Lingyu was also a little confused. Gu Shengyin could only say, stay in the courtyard for a while this time. Think carefully about your future and let me know when you've made up your mind. She truly felt that her fifth sister was quite pitiful. The 2 of them left the courtyard. The high priest couldn't help but ask Gu Shengyin, why are you so concerned about your sister's matters? Why? Gu Shengyin pondered for a moment. Perhaps it was because she had paid too much attention to her from the beginning, so she couldn't pretend not to see anything along the way? She shook her head. Maybe it's fate? The great consecrator did not dwell on this topic. Instead, he brought up another matter. When do you plan to marry me? Gu Shengyin was stunned. Wedding? That was too soon. The high priest said matter-of-factly, I think in the Tianxian continent, after you've fallen in love with each other, the next step would be a wedding. He paused and looked at Gu Shengyin. Are you unwilling, Linin? Of course, Gu Shengyin wasn't unwilling. She just didn't expect him to act so quickly. But since the high priest had brought it up, she wouldn't refuse. After receiving his disciple's affirmation, the high priest nodded, I'll ask for your opinion first. Then I'll send someone to your house to propose marriage. The chief consecrator's speed was definitely swift and decisive. In less than 3 days after he said this, he personally came to the residence of the protector of the nation. Chang Tsugong, the protector general of the state, who had always been resolute and cold in front of outsiders, welcomed the arrival of the head consecrator in fear and trepidation. After that, they had a conversation in fear and trepidation, accepted an extremely precious gift, and finally respectfully sent the head consecrator away. Until the person left, his expression was somewhat absent-minded. What happened just now? The high priest had just proposed marriage to him and wanted to marry Lin Yin. General Cheng finally came back to his senses. When he realized what this meant, he couldn't hide the joy on his face. The head consecrator just said that he wanted to marry Lin Yin. From now on, the great general's residence would have one more powerful in-law. Servants, invite Madam to old Madam's courtyard. The masters of the National Protector General's residence were all overjoyed when they heard the news. At this time, Chang Tsugong said, "The head consecrator seems to be quite anxious." The old mistress interrupted her, "Where is Yin? Only then did General Chang remember that his daughter was still in the Shentian Tower. At this moment, a servant suddenly came to report that eldest miss had returned home. Only then did the old madam nod. That's more like it. Of course, the bride has to stay at home to prepare for the wedding. The protector of the nation's residence was filled with joy as they prepared. The news that the high priest was going to marry his little disciple, Chang Lin Yin, had also spread. Everyone was envious of the Chang family's good luck. They had a good daughter who had actually captured the high priest's heart. As for gossiping, in this world where the strong were respected, who dared to gossip about the high priest? Chapter 8:14. The great general's residence was filled with guests. Now, everyone knew that the great general's residence had the head consecrator as their backer. As long as the head consecrator did not fall, even the imperial family would have to think twice before causing trouble for the Cheng family. However, receiving guests was left to others. Gu Shengyin only had to wait for someone to serve her every day. She even took the time to visit Chang Lingyu's residence. Chang Lingyu finally made a decision in the past few days. She did not want to stay in the second prince's backyard for the rest of her life. To Chang Lingyu, the second prince was a complete stranger. She had her own ideas and the life she wanted to live. She did not want to follow in Chang Lingyu's footsteps. Gu Shengyin expressed her understanding. She told Chang Lingyu to be at ease and said that she would help her solve all her problems. Actually, with her current status, it would only take a single sentence to solve the problem. It was far better for the head consecrator to handle this matter than for Gu Shengyin to handle it herself. The head consecrator personally went to the second prince's residence and said a few words. The next day, Chang Lingyu was respectfully sent back by the second prince's residence. Chang Lingyu was originally just a concubine with no status, so it was easier to get her back. Gu Shengyin personally went to tell Chang Tsugong that her fifth sister had been possessed. Fortunately, she had discovered it. Now that she had been reborn and had the talent to cultivate celestial qi, she hoped that her father would treat her well. Of course, General Chang would not refuse such a small matter. After Chang Lingyu's matter was settled, Gu Shengyin waited to get married. 2 months later, Chang Lingyin married the head consecrator in the Shentian Tower. For the next few years, no one saw their whereabouts. Some said that they were cultivating in seclusion, while others said that they were traveling the world. 10 years later, Chang Lingyin challenged the Saint of the Netherworld in the far west and won. She became famous in one battle. The Saint of the Netherworld was a master who had been famous in the Tianxian continent for a long time. He had dominated the far west for many years, but he was defeated by Chang Lingyin, who was not even 30 years old. His talent could be said to be terrifying. Another year later, Chang Lingyin and her flute swept away the notorious bandit group in the north, the Ice Plain Alliance. It shocked the entire continent once again. In these 2 battles, Chang Lingyin had proven her strength to everyone. From then on, when other people mentioned her, they would not say that she was the wife of the head consecrator, but the true #1 talent in the Tianxian land in 1,000 years. "Teacher, you're not used to running around with me like this, right?" Gu Shengyin looked at the man beside her and felt a little embarrassed. Even though they had been married for many years, she was still used to calling him teacher. In the past 10 years or so, the head consecrator she had seen had always been sitting on the white jade platform. The great high priest reached out to pull the cloak over her shoulders and gently shook his head. "No, it's the exact opposite. These years have been the happiest time of my life." Time didn't have much meaning to him. In the past, he sat on the white jade platform all day long to meditate. not because he liked peace and quiet. It was because he couldn't find anything to pay attention to or to pass the time. It was her who had let him know what it felt like to be worried. She had let him walk down the altar and let him experience emotions and warmth. To be able to accompany her through the great river north and south, to see the happy smile on her face, was the thing he looked forward to the most. After 1,000 years, Gu Shengyin had finally reached the end of her life. The head consecrator still looked the same. Time had never left a trace on his body. Teacher. The corner of Gu Shengyin's eyes felt a little sour. She felt heartache for this man. She had reached the end of her life and left, but this man had to suffer the pain of losing his true love again. The head consecrator hugged his wife who was breathing weakly. For a long time, he held her tightly until he could no longer feel her warmth. Chapter 8:15. Gu Shengyin returned to that space and watched the man hold her lifeless body for a long time before finally bringing her to the Shentian Tower. No one saw him come out again. She withdrew her gaze, suppressed the pain in her heart, and reached out her hand. The little bird that appeared in her hand still didn't open its eyes. Gu Shengyin tacitly agreed, "System, go to the next world." The system flashed white and Gu Shengyin opened her eyes in another world. She turned into a white fox and was in a cave full of peach blossoms. Gu Shengyin opened her shining eyes and raised a paw to take a look. This little white fox didn't seem to have transformed yet. Gu Shengyin began to straighten out the plot of this world in her mind. The original Qing Bo was a rare nine-tailed white fox that only appeared once in 10,000 years. The nine-tailed white fox was a mythological beast that could be compared to the azure dragon and the phoenix after reaching adulthood. Her bloodline was noble and pure. She didn't have parents and couldn't find any relatives. It seemed that from the beginning of her consciousness, she had lived alone in this uninhabited peach blossom forest. She was less than 100 years old and was at her most vulnerable and ignorant age. When she reached 100 years old, her first foxtail would grow, and her spiritual wisdom would be fully awakened. The inherited memories in her bloodline would awaken and she would have a certain amount of self-protection. With Qing Bo's status, she should have been the favored child of the heavenly Tao. She would quietly wait for the first foxtail to grow out, then she would begin her formal cultivation. She would only need to wait for the Dharma manifestation foxtail that would appear every 1,000 years to successfully attain Tao and ascend to become an immortal. However, she just happened to meet someone. A cultivator who suffered great changes in her family due to evil demons when she was young and her entire family was wiped out. Master Wuxin wasn't originally called Wuxin. When she was young, she was still very naive and unaffected. It was only after her family was slaughtered overnight that her temperament changed and she hated the demon race. Later, she was accepted by the world's most famous cultivation sect, the Watermoon sect. After she succeeded in her studies, she gave herself this Taoist name. She vowed to kill all evildoers in her lifetime. She called herself Wuxin. From the heartless fairy to the heartless nun, it took her hundreds of years to make the name of the heartless nun famous in the cultivation world with the sword in her hand and the blood of countless demons. The name of Nun Wuxin was more ominous than good. Because regardless of right or wrong, as long as it was a demon, regardless of whether the other party had done evil or not, even if it was a newly born little demon that did not know anything, her sword would never show mercy. The white fox, Qing Bo, had met her the first time she had transformed into a human. The result was obvious. How could the little fox who had just cultivated into a human form be a match for the famous heartless nun? Qing Bo was killed by Nun Wuxin. Even in death, she did not understand why this human wanted to kill her the moment he saw her. Nun Wuxin didn't get a good result either. A divine beast like the nine-tailed fox was only born once every 10,000 years, and all of them were born with the luck of the heavenly Tao. She had already killed too much to begin with, and it was difficult for her to achieve the great Tao. Now that she had committed such sins, it was impossible for the heavenly Tao to forgive her. When Nun Wuxin advanced to the next tribulation, the ruthless heavenly Tao would pay back all the sins she had committed. Death was her final outcome. However, no matter what happened to her, the innocent demons who had died under her sword would never come back to life. Chapter 8:16. Gu Shengyin raised her claws and glanced at them silently. She was still in her infancy. Apart from being a little faster, she had no ability to protect herself. This peach blossom forest was still quite safe, but this place could only protect her before her Dharma form grew its first tail and transformed. Once she was able to transform successfully, this array that had existed to protect her since she was born would lose its effectiveness. The strong never grew up in a greenhouse. In the original plot, not long after Qing Bo transformed, she went out and met the heartless nun, who happened to be passing by. To the heartless nun, she had just gotten rid of a little demon. But to Qing Bo, she had just gone out of curiosity. Before she had time to appreciate the outside world, she had closed her eyes forever. She had to leave here. Gu Shengyin silently concluded. The heartless nun was still far away. She just had to leave here as soon as possible and avoid her before she had the ability to protect herself. But Gu Shengyin looked at her snow-white fur in distress. Her appearance was too eye-catching. Although the nine-tailed white fox was rare and most people would not think that this was the legendary beast when they saw her appearance, Gu Shengyin had to admit that even if Qing Bo was just a fox, she was still a stunning fox. Her red, snow-white skin was flawless. Her pair of dark green eyes seemed to carry endless charm and affection. When people looked at her gently, they could not help but daydream endlessly. She simply lay there. Her movements were very leisurely, but when outsiders looked at her, they felt that her posture was incomparably elegant and charming, graceful and charming. This was the characteristic brought about by her race. When she was in her fox form, she was already so seductive. If she transformed into her human form, who knew how stunning she would be? Gu Shengyin got up and walked out of the cave. Step by step, she walked out of the cave and began to walk outside. There were many peach blossoms outside all year round, but Qing Bo did not like them because they would not talk to her. After so many years, the only one who could talk to her and communicate with her was a small tree by the river in the distance. Qing Bo still remembered that when he first had memories, this school cloud tree was still a small seedling. Now, it was already very tall. Qingbo, you're up? The leaves on Yunshu's body rustled. This was her unique way of greeting her neighbors. Gu Shengyin called out to her gently, Yunshu, when did you transform? The branches of the cloud tree shook violently. Then, with a flash of green light, the big tree by the river disappeared. A little girl in green stood in front of Gu Shengyin. She looked to be around 12 or 13 years old. Her features were beautiful and gentle. At this moment, she was looking at herself with joy. She smiled at Gu Shengyin and said, Qingbo, I can transform. Gu Shengyin smiled and said, Congratulations. In 100 years, Yunshu's aptitude was extremely good in the entire demon race. Of course, this was also due to this array formation. The spiritual energy in this peach blossom forest was extremely rich. To a nine-tailed white fox like Qing Bo, it was not very useful. But to an ordinary Yunshu, it was already very nourishing. Seeing Yunshu happily turning in circles on the grass, Gu Shengyin suddenly said, Yunshu, do you want to come with me and take a look outside? Chapter 8:17. Hearing this, Yunshu's eyes lit up. Qing Bo, are you talking about the human world outside? The little white fox nodded. Yunshu was elated. Although she had lived for 100 years, her personality was still very simple. The human world was a very attractive existence to her. Moreover, although she called Gu Shengyin Qing Bo, deep down, she was very obedient to her words. This was the absolute suppression of the demon race over those with lower bloodlines. Gu Shengyin knew where the exit was. Outsiders could not enter here, but it was very easy for the people inside to enter. Yunshu, can you use spells? Gu Shengyin asked. Yunshu nodded. All right, then you can create a guard. We will pretend to be a young lady from a wealthy family who sneaked out with a servant. Yunshu had fair skin and a beautiful face. No one would doubt that she was a young lady from a wealthy family. Qing Bo nodded. She pointed at a rock at the side and lightly tapped it. A strong adult man appeared in front of the girl and the fox. He cupped his hands at Yun Shu. "Young lady." His voice was deep. Gu Shengyin looked at the big man. Although he looked a little slow, his muscles were bulging and he was tall. One look and one would feel that he was not someone to be trifled with. Gu Shengyin did not plan to go to any place where cultivators lived. She was going to go to the human world. With a guard like this, it was enough. She looked at Yun Shu again. "Yun Shu, this name is not very good. How about you be called Yun Shu from now on?" Yun Shu repeated it twice and happily said, "All right, I'll be called Yun Shu." The next day, two figures, one big and one small, walked out of the valley that was rarely visited by people. The big one was dressed in black. He was tall and burly and looked like a guard. The small one looked to be 12 or 13 years old. She was dressed in green clothes of unknown texture. Her face was beautiful. One look and one could tell that she was a young lady from a wealthy family. However, the most eye-catching thing was the little thing in the young lady's arms. It was an extremely beautiful white fox. Its entire body was pure white and flawless. At this moment, it was lazily nestled in the little girl's arms. Its pair of clear green eyes were casually looking around. The two of them arrived at a small town nearby. When they arrived at a crowded place, Gu Shengyin became even more conspicuous. Especially some of the girls, when they saw Gu Shengyin's appearance, they almost couldn't walk. Girls had no resistance to this kind of delicate and beautiful furry little fellow. Fortunately, Stone's physique was enough to intimidate people. With so many people watching, no one dared to come up and talk. According to Gu Shengyin's instructions, Yun Shu only said that she had come to the city to look for her only remaining relative in accordance with her mother's dying wish. Who would have thought that there was no such person here? She had no choice but to find a temporary residence in this small town. With Stone keeping watch, that family didn't dare to have any bad intentions. They took the money and left. After that person left, Yun Shu looked at Gu Shengyin in her arms with admiration. "Qingba, how do you know everything? You're simply amazing." Gu Shengyin smiled. This was the most basic of common knowledge. Only the little tree demon didn't know. She found an excuse for herself. "In my inherited memories, there is a method to survive in the human world." Yun Shu knew what Gu Shengyin's original form was. When she heard this, she was envious. Inherited memories were generally something that only demons with extremely noble bloodlines would have. For a little tree demon like her, there was no such thing as inherited memories. Chapter 8:18. Gu Shengyin and Yun Shu settled down in this small town. Yun Shu was a little girl living alone with a bodyguard. It was said that she had lost her entire family. The neighbors couldn't help but sigh when they talked about it, and they treated her with more kindness. In less than half a month, the gentle Yun Shu had become familiar with the people around her. Every time she went out, she could even greet the aunties of each family. Gu Shengyin carefully sensed the surroundings. This small town was a standard human city, and there were no cultivators. To ordinary humans, cultivators were equivalent to a legend. Cultivators had their own set of rules. For example, in a human city like this, cultivators were not allowed to use vital energy, and they could not reveal their cultivator identity in front of others. Cultivators were not allowed to disturb the lives of humans. This was a rule set by the emperors of the human world and cultivators. The emperors of the human world were protected by the innate dragon aura, and they were also favored by the heavens. Even cultivators did not dare to easily disobey their words. In other words, this place was very safe. She didn't know why the heartless nun would come to this place in the original plot. In this life, Gu Shengyin did not believe that she, who knew everything, could not avoid her before she had enough strength. Time passed year by year. After staying in this small town for 3 years, Yun Shu and Gu Shengyin changed places. This was really a last resort. Yun Shu was a tree demon in human form. Her face could not change every year like a normal human girl. For 3 years, she could only occasionally use magic to change her appearance. This was already the limit. Stone drove the carriage, and Yun Shu sat in the carriage with Gu Shengyin in her arms. The sun is really big. Yun Shu was rather listless. As a tree, Yun Shu didn't like this kind of weather, because the scorching sun would make her beautiful leaves bleached. Gu Shengyin had grown a little taller. If she were to stand now, she could already reach Yun Shu's knees. Bear with it, Yun Shu. We will reach Lotus City soon. Gu Shengyin comforted her. Lotus City was the only city in this world where human beings and practitioners coexisted. It was also the only city where demons could coexist with cultivators and humans. Because this city was occupied by an enormous Buddhist sect, the Lotus Platform sect. If one were to say that there was a group of people in this world who were wholeheartedly good, who did not care about race, who did not care about gains and losses, who wholeheartedly focused on cultivating the next life and cultivating kindness, in that case, it could only be the Buddhist cultivators of the Lotus Platform sect. There were many Buddhist sects in this world, but the most convincing one was the Lotus Platform sect. Even the arrogant demon race, who had always looked down on the hypocritical human race and the self-proclaimed righteous path cultivators, was rather polite to the Buddhist cultivators of the Lotus Platform sect. Logically speaking, Gu Shengyin and the others should have gone there earlier if they knew there was such a city. However, Gu Shengyin wanted to avoid Nun Wuxin. She knew that Nun Wuxin had always disliked the pretentious behavior of the Lotus Platform sect. She even often lingered in some of the cities around Lotus City, specifically waiting for the demons who went to seek refuge to fall into her trap. Her behavior had once caused dissatisfaction among some Buddhist cultivators of the Lotus Platform sect. An arhat even personally came to banish her. However, Nun Wuxin relied on the benevolence of the Buddhist cultivators to not kill her. She actually did not change her ways despite repeated warnings. In Gu Shengyin's words, this old nun was not only vicious and merciless, but also shameless. Chapter 8:19. This time, she knew that the other party was going to live in a small city in the Lotus Pedestal sect. That was why she held back and did not make a move. Now, an elder of the Lotus Pedestal sect finally made a move. He took out the decree of the Lotus Pedestal sect's abbot, stating that the heartless nun was not to appear within 10,000 miles of the Lotus Pedestal sect. The abbot of the Lotus Pedestal sect, Venerable Yuan De, was a powerhouse who was close to ascension. His decree was strictly enforced. The moment the decree was issued, the heartless nun was banished back to the Water Moon sect. This time, the Water Moon sect also knew that this bloodthirsty elder had angered the Buddhist cultivators who had always been lenient. The sect master gave face to the Lotus Pedestal sect and directly put her in confinement. There were also many people in the Water Moon sect who were dissatisfied with the heartless nun's actions. However, she was powerful and was the Grand Supreme Elder's favorite disciple. She was also the current sect master's junior sister. With the Grand Supreme Elder's protection, even the sect master could not do anything to her. The heartless nun was a very important reason why the demon clan hated human cultivators so much. It was said that the demon clan had also sent many powerhouses to kill the heartless nun. However, this person was not only powerful, but the Grand Supreme Elder of the Water Moon sect, who had always doted on his little disciple, also knew that his little disciple had probably provoked many enemies outside. He gave her countless treasures and even gave her 3 natal sword energies. The heartless nun, who had so many protective talismans, had been so arrogant for hundreds of years. No one could do anything to her. Nothing happened along the way. Gu Shengyin and Yun Shu arrived at the city gate of Lotus City. When she arrived at the entrance, she realized that the city did not have a city gate, and there was no one guarding the entrance. However, there was a glimmer of light at the entrance. It was obvious that there was a formation there. She realized that even if there was no one guarding the entrance, everyone who wanted to enter the city was lining up in an orderly manner. There was no one who jumped the queue. Moreover, among these people, there were quite a few demonic cultivators that she could recognize. Yun Shu's cultivation level was not high. Many demon cultivators and humans recognized her, but none of them found it strange. This made Gu Shengyin click her tongue in wonder. At the same time, she became more and more curious about the Lotus Pedestal sect. What kind of sect could build such a city? Ah! When a person in front of him entered, a black light suddenly appeared on his body, and he was directly thrown out by the array formation. Many people looked at that person with vigilance. What is this? Gu Xingyin was puzzled. Just as she was about to ask the system, someone beside her spoke up. This is the Lotus Platform sect's kindness-seeking formation, right? It is said that only those with good intentions can enter Lotus City through the formation. If one has evil intentions, the formation will not let them pass. There was such a thing. Gu Shengyin couldn't help but find it interesting. Indeed, the existence of such a formation was more reliable than any gods. However, to maintain such a formation, one would need absolute strength to do so. Soon, it was Gu Shengyin and Yun Shu's turn. Both of them were people with pure minds. They had never done anything bad and had no debts. Naturally, they passed through the kindness-seeking array without any suspense. However, the stone returned to its original form under the kindness-seeking array. Yun Shu looked at the stone that had returned to its original form. She couldn't help but squat down and pick it up. A demon beside her had been watching her for a long time. When he saw her, he walked over. "Little tree demon, why are you picking up such a stone?" Chapter 8:20. Yun Shu did not expect that someone would be able to identify her so easily. She blushed and asked with widened eyes, "You? How did you know that I'm a tree demon?" The man smiled confidently. "Not only do I know that you're a little tree demon, I also know this." He pointed at Gu Shengyin in her arms. "This little fellow is also a little monster that hasn't transformed." Hearing him mention Gu Shengyin, Yun Shu's expression immediately became vigilant. She hugged Gu Shengyin and took a step back. Seeing her like this, the man could not help but laugh. "Why are you so nervous? I don't have any ill intentions towards the little fox." What he said was true. Gu Shengyin did not feel any ill intentions from this man. Furthermore, fighting is not allowed in Lotus City. Blood is not allowed. You should know that, right? Yun Shu finally heaved a sigh of relief. The man suddenly asked, "Why are there only the two of you here? Where are your elders?" Speaking of this, his expression became serious. Although the demon race was unrestrained by nature, they treasured their cubs the most. Every demon cub was the most precious treasure and should be guarded by an adult demon until they had the strength to protect themselves. Why did these two little fellows come to Lotus City alone? However, Yun Shu's response was a blank expression. What cub was precious? She had always grown up alone. Looking at her expression, the man immediately understood. "Don't tell me. You've always been outside by yourself?" Yun Shu remembered that Gu Shengyin had told her not to mention the peach blossom forest and nodded. The man held his forehead. He did not expect that he would ask about two wild cubs. Looking at their appearances, one of them had just transformed and was at most a little stronger than a cultivator in the qi refining stage. The other one was still in her infancy stage. "You're lucky to be able to come to Lotus City so smoothly," he said with a sigh. "Are you willing to come with me? In Lotus City, we demon cultivators have our own place," he asked. Yun Shu was still at a loss, but Gu Shengyin called out softly to express her agreement. Since Gu Shengyin was willing, Yun Shu would not object. The man looked at Gu Shengyin in amazement and praised, "It's a beautiful and clever little guy." As he walked, he said, "My name is Xian. My original form is a black panther. It's fate that we met today. Speaking of which, why are you still holding this stone?" Yun Shu smiled shyly. "She Tu has protected us for a long time. I'm a little reluctant to part with him." Protection. Xian thought of stone, that big guy. Perhaps he had intimidated a lot of people in the human world. He had a pure and innocent heart. Xian brought tree and fox to a courtyard. "Bodhi Granny, I've brought two cubs." Gu Shengyin was surprised to see Xian lowering his head with a sincere and respectful look. Along the way, she had a rough understanding of Xian's personality. He was carefree and unrestrained. What kind of person could make him so respectful? Soon, she would know what kind of person he was. The courtyard door opened. Gu Shengyin was carried by Yun Shu and followed behind Xian. There was a very tall tree planted in the courtyard, and there were many beautiful flowers growing there as well. However, no one would see these at first glance when they entered, because there was another person sitting in the courtyard. Chapter 8:21. The person was a woman, but she was wearing an ordinary green monk's robe. Her hair was tied up in a bun with a wooden hairpin. Her attire, which was neither fish nor fowl, did not look out of place at all on her. She did not look old. In fact, she looked very young, probably not more than 30 years old. However, if one looked at her temperament, one would know that this was not something a 30-year-old person should have. She simply sat there, but it was as if all the troubles in the world were far away, leaving only this pure land in front of one's eyes. Yun Shu stared blankly at the woman and mumbled, "What a beautiful sister, just like what?" Her eyes suddenly lit up and she said, "Just like those female bodhisattvas in the temples." When she was still in the human city, she went to a few temple fairs. The female bodhisattvas in the temples also looked like this. Their faces were calm and compassionate, always looking at the world with kindness. Xian blinked his eyes and looked at Yun Shu with a dumbfounded expression. Sister? She really dared to call her that. Then, he looked at the woman carefully. Bodhi Granny, this cub doesn't know anything. The woman smiled at him. Are you afraid that I'll be angry with 2 children? Xian smiled embarrassedly. The woman waved at Yun Shu, her eyes filled with unconcealable fondness. Child, come here. Yun Shu liked the sister's aura very much, so she walked over. What's your name? Yun Shu answered obediently, Yun Shu. The woman smiled and nodded. That's a good name. She continued, You can't call me sister, you should call me Granny. My name is Bodhi, you can call me Bodhi Granny too, right? Yun Shu knew that Granny was a form of address for the elderly. This woman did not look old at all, so why was she called Granny? Yun Shu kept her doubts to the bottom of her heart and did not dare to ask too much. She obediently called out, Bodhi Granny. Gu Shengyin also called out, but her voice was only the cry of a cub. When Bodhi Granny's gaze fell on Gu Shengyin, she paused and said, This little one is not ordinary. What's her name? Yun Shu hurriedly replied, Bodhi Nanny. Her name is Qing Bo. Bodhi Nanny stared at Gu Shengyin's watery eyes and nodded. This name suits you. The man and the fox settled down in this small courtyard. It wasn't until a long time later that Gu Shengyin understood something. Bodhi Granny's true form was originally a Bodhi tree at the entrance of the Lotus Pedestal sect. After listening to the Buddhist teachings of the Lotus Pedestal sect every day, she actually developed a root of wisdom and cultivated a human form. Since she had cultivated a human form, she no longer stayed at the entrance of the sect. Instead, she wore a monk's robe and tied her hair into a bun, becoming a lay disciple of the Lotus Platform sect. Taking in a demonic cultivator, and a female demonic cultivator at that, as a lay disciple, one could see the tolerance of the Lotus Platform sect. In terms of Buddhist teachings, there were probably many disciples of the Lotus Platform sect who were not as proficient as Bodhi Granny. Not long after, demonic cultivators would come to this small courtyard to pay their respects to Bodhi Granny. However, only Yun Shu and Gu Shengyin remained in her courtyard to cultivate. Bodhi Granny seemed to like Yun Shu a lot because they were of the same race. Not only did she personally teach her cultivation techniques, but she also frequently tested her. As for Gu Shengyin, she let her do as she pleased. Chapter 8:22. Yun Shu was puzzled. Mammy, why are you only teaching me and not Qingba? Bodhi Mammy smiled and patted her head. I can't teach her. Although she could not tell what kind of bloodline the little fox had, after years of studying Buddhism, she always had some vague predictions about certain things. This little fox was not simple. She was afraid that she didn't have the qualifications to teach her. Bodhi Mammy didn't care about her, so Gu Shengyin was happy to be free. After all, after she transformed, she would be able to unlock her inherited memories. There would naturally be the most suitable cultivation method for the nine-tailed Arctic fox to cultivate. Therefore, she really didn't need to be anxious. She began to walk outside. Those who could enter Lotus City were all kind-hearted people. Therefore, no one would have any bad intentions towards a little fox. At most, they would look at her and praise her as a pretty little fellow. Gu Shengyin heard two people talking beside her. An elder from the Lotus Pedestal sect is going to give a lecture on Buddhism. Let's quickly go and get a seat. Okay. Gu Shengyin was curious. From the looks of it, this wasn't the first time the Lotus Pedestal sect was giving a lecture on Buddhism. Moreover, it didn't seem to be taboo for outsiders to listen in. She had always been interested in the Lotus Pedestal sect, so she followed the two people for a while. A huge Buddhist temple appeared in front of her. On the plaque above the main door, the words Lotus Pedestal Sect appeared in front of her. Just by staring at these three words, Gu Shengyin felt her mind become clear. Some small worries and troubles seemed to disappear with it. At the same time, some problems that had been troubling her for many days were easily solved. These three words must have been written by an almighty Buddhist. Gu Shengyin had always respected this kind of almighty, not to mention that she had just benefited from it. Therefore, she clasped her two paws together and bowed to the plaque. Amitabha, this little benefactor is quite spiritual. A gentle voice spoke from beside her. Gu Shengyin turned her head and saw a kind-looking old sorcerer smiling at her. There were two little novice monks standing behind him, looking at him with a grin. Only then did Gu Shengyin remember what she looked like now. A fox was bowing to a plaque. No wonder the two novice monks were smiling so. She turned around and ran through the door. A novice monk couldn't help but laugh out loud. The old mage turned his head and sighed helplessly. You two are still laughing at him. Your wisdom is not even half as good as his. The young novice monk held back his laughter and said, This disciple knows. This disciple doesn't have any other meaning. I just feel that the little fox's appearance is really too cute. The old mage recalled the scene just now and couldn't help but smile. Forget it, you can leave. Gu Shengyin entered the Lotus Pedestal sect unimpeded. She didn't know how magnanimous this sect was. She was a Yao cultivator, but she had entered the sect's restricted area. So many people had turned a blind eye to her. Weren't they afraid that she would steal something? In fact, she was overthinking things. The Lotus Pedestal sect had been famous for so many years. Countless cultivators and Yao cultivators had come because of its reputation, but there had never been any bad rumors. One of the most important reasons was that the guests who came here were all kind-hearted and upright people. Another reason was the strength of the Lotus Pedestal sect itself. Their powerful strength gave them enough confidence. After making several turns, Gu Shengyin realized that she was lost. Chapter 8:23. After all the rooms in the Lotus Pedestal sect were built to look the same. After she walked around twice, she helplessly found that she couldn't tell north from south anymore. At this moment, she faintly heard the voice of a young novice monk. Martial Uncle Yuan Xiao isn't going to attend the assembly today? It's said that Martial Uncle's Dharma has reached a bottleneck, and he's now in seclusion, so he won't be going today. Gu Shengyin's eyes lit up, and she walked towards the place where the voice came from. However, when she walked around there, the young novice monk was nowhere to be seen. She helplessly lay on the ground, and simply enjoyed the scenery in the courtyard. Let's rest for a while. If worse comes to worst, I'll let the system take me out later if I really can't find the way. The system. Suddenly, the door where Gu Shengyin was lying on the ground opened with a creak. Gu Shengyin, who happened to be lying on the ground at the door, was caught off guard by this push, and her round and furry body directly rolled several times on the ground, all the way to the flower bed outside the corridor. Gu Shengyin, who was seeing stars. The person who pushed open the door, who never expected this to happen. A trace of surprise flashed through that person's eyes, but he quickly reacted. He hurriedly walked forward, and picked up Gu Shengyin, who was still dizzy and hadn't reacted yet. Gu Shengyin felt that she had fallen into an embrace filled with the familiar scent of Lian Xiang. This aura cleared her dizzy mind for a moment. Wait a minute. Her lover in this life was a monk? She was so shocked by this cruel fact that she didn't feel dizzy anymore. She raised her head and looked up. At this moment, that person also lowered his head and said with a smile, "Fortunately, you're not injured." Their eyes met. Gu Shengyin was stunned for a moment. This face is really good-looking. After so many worlds, Gu Shengyin felt for the first time that her lover was so suitable for Lian Xiang. His face was elegant and delicate, and there was a gentle smile on his face. His eyes were gentle and focused on Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin could clearly see his own reflection in those eyes. Yuan Xiao was stunned for a moment when she met that pair of beautiful green eyes, but she quickly returned to normal. He gently placed Gu Shengyin back on the ground. He put his palms together and bowed to her. "Little fox, I apologize for what happened just now. This poor monk apologizes to you." What the hell was this benefactor little fox? Did you ever think that a fox would understand you if you apologized to her in such a serious manner? Wait, the point is, you haven't even shaved. Why are you calling me this penniless monk? Yuan Xiao saw that the little fox was staring at him without blinking and thought that something was wrong. He patiently asked, "Little fox benefactor, is there something you need?" Gu Shengyin did not say anything. He smiled. "If there's nothing else, this penniless monk will continue with his homework." Gu Shengyin still did not speak. Yuan Xiao then returned to his room, but he found that the little fox had followed him in. Gu Shengyin looked around the room. The furnishings inside were very simple. It was just a bed, a table by the window, and a cabinet for Li Mu's clothes. It seemed that the life in this lotus pedestal sect was quite poor. Yuan Xiao looked at the little fox's pair of beautiful eyes that were very human-like as it looked around the room. He couldn't help but smile. He no longer cared about her and just read Buddhist scriptures by the window. After finishing a round of homework, he found that there was a little thing lying at his feet. Chapter 8:24. Yuan Xiao didn't know when the white, fluffy little fox had fallen asleep. She lay softly by his feet, and Yuan Xiao even saw her smacking her lips in satisfaction. He couldn't help but smile. He didn't know why, but when he saw this little fox, he felt a sense of closeness. Buddhism was about fate, and he didn't reject this feeling. On the contrary, he was willing to accept his instincts and get close to this little fellow. He gently picked her up from the ground and placed her in his arms. Gu Shengyin vaguely felt that his body had been moved. He opened his eyes in a daze, and when he saw that it was him, he felt that the embrace was so comfortable that he fell asleep again. Yuan Xiao felt that she was both pitiful and adorable, but he couldn't help but worry. What if she met a bad person in the future? She trusted others so easily. After thinking about it, he felt that he could only put in more effort to watch over her in the future. What a silly little fellow. He couldn't help but lightly flick her head. Gu Shengyin unhappily reached out her paw and slapped his mischievous hand on her head before falling asleep again. She slept soundly all the way until dusk. When she opened her eyes, she saw Yuan Xiao's flawless handsome face. The sun had not set yet, but the light had turned into a soft orange color of Yuan Xiao. The light scattered on Yuan Xiao's face, making him look peerless. As a fox, how could he endure such a beauty? Gu Shengyin straightened his back and planted a kiss on Yuan Xiao's cheek without hesitation. Yuan Xiao was stunned for a moment. She touched her cheek that had been kissed and lowered her head to look at the little fox. Seeing the little fellow's undisguised pride, his surprise disappeared without a trace. She was still a little benefactor. When she saw something she liked, she had to show her sovereignty. Then, was he the one she liked? Thinking of this possibility, a hint of a smile flashed across his eyes. Looking at the sky, he said to Gu Shengyin, "Benefactor little fox, it's getting late. If you don't go back, your family will be worried." Gu Shengyin thought for a moment. Indeed, if Yun Shu did not see her, she would probably cry. She gently bit Yuan Xiu's sleeve. Yuan Xiu looked at her in confusion. Gu Shengyin was anxious. When she saw the pen and paper on the table, her eyes suddenly lit up. She bit the end of the brush and finally wrote a word on the paper in a crooked manner. Yuan Xiu looked at it for a long time and finally recognized that it was the word Lu. "You mean you're lost?" he asked. Gu Shengyin nodded. Yuan Xiu thought for a moment. "If you're lost in the temple, just nod your head and I'll bring you out. If you don't remember the way home, just nod your head." Gu Shengyin nodded her head. She just couldn't tell the path inside the Lotus Pedestal sect. Hearing the little fox say that she could find her own way home, for some reason, Yuan Xiu felt a sense of loss. He even thought that if this little fellow did not have a home, it would be great if she could always stay by his side. In the next moment, he was frightened by his own selfish thoughts. How could he have such thoughts? Amit Ba. He hurriedly put his hands together and chanted the name of Buddha, hoping that Buddha would not blame him. Chapter 8:25. Yuan Xiu carried Gu Shengyin out of the courtyard. Along the way, the disciples of the Lotus Pedestal sect were very surprised to see him carrying a little fox in his arms. Gu Shengyin heard these people address Yuan Xiu as martial uncle, and some even addressed him as Grandmaster Xiao. She could not help but feel a little surprised about his identity. It seemed that this little monk who had not even finished shaving his head was not an ordinary person. Yuan Xiu did not seem to be walking very fast, but in fact, he arrived at the entrance of the Lotus Pedestal sect very quickly. He gently squatted down and placed Gu Shengyin on the ground. He said softly, "Little fox benefactor, can you walk back on your own?" Gu Shengyin nodded. Yuan Xiu looked at her and suddenly felt a little reluctant. "After parting today, it would be very difficult for us to meet again, right?" He sighed and silently chanted a few words of Buddhism. He put away the melancholy in his heart and told himself that everything was fate. Suddenly, his robe was tugged at. He lowered his head and saw that the little white fox was using her claws to tug at his robe. When she saw that he was finally looking at her, she let go of his robe and stretched out a paw to shake it at him. He could not help but smile. The melancholy he felt just now disappeared without a trace. "Little fox benefactor, goodbye." He said goodbye to her in a serious tone. The passers-by did not find it strange when they saw the people of the Lotus Pedestal sect talking to a fox. There were many strange people in the Lotus Pedestal sect. After Gu Shengyin said goodbye to her lover, she ran back. It was almost dark. She had never been back so late. Yun Shu was probably worried. Sure enough, halfway through, Gu Shengyin saw a familiar figure. Qingbo Yun Shu, who was anxiously walking on the street, saw Gu Shengyin running on the road. She called out to her in surprise and squatted down to pick her up. "Qingbo, where did you go?" "I was so worried." Yun Shu could not help but complain. She was really anxious. Ever since she was conscious, she had always lived in that peach blossom forest. The only person who could communicate with her and grow up with her was Qingbo. Although Bodhi Granny was a good person now, Qingbo was the most important person in Yun Shu's heart. Gu Shengyin also knew that she had made her worried today, so she very consciously called out to her. "I'm sorry, Yun Shu. I went to the Lotus Platform sect and forgot to tell you." How could Yun Shu really be angry with her? It was just that he spoke a little too harshly in a moment of desperation. Soon, Gu Shengyin's coaxing made her laugh, and he carried her back. "You're back." Bodhi Nanny smiled as she watched the two of them walk back. "I told you that nothing would happen to you in Lotus City, but Yun Shu was so worried that she insisted on going out to look for you. I couldn't persuade her otherwise." Gu Shengyin's heart warmed slightly. She called out to Yun Shu softly and only snuggled in her arms without saying a word. Bodhi Nanny looked at the two of them and wanted to laugh. She waved her hand and dismissed them. "All right, you two must be tired. There is food in the room. Rest early after eating." The next day, Gu Shengyin went to the Lotus Platform sect again. This time, she told Yun Shu and Bodhi Nanny in advance that she would be back at night and that they did not need to worry. Yuan Xiao. Gu Shengyin did not know that after she went out, Bodhi Nanny was sitting alone in the courtyard, muttering that name in a slight daze. Chapter 8:26. This time, Gu Shengyin knew the way and accurately found Yuan Xiao's house. Yuan Xiao was chanting Buddhist scriptures as usual when someone knocked lightly on the door. At first, he thought it was a disciple from the sect looking for him and was wondering why the other party didn't say anything. Then, he saw the door open a crack and a small white figure squeezed in. He was surprised and delighted. "Benefactor Little Fox?" Gu Shengyin paused when she heard this name. Being called Benefactor Little Fox was really not nice. She huffed and puffed as she ran to Yuan Xiao's side. Then, she climbed up his thighs with familiarity. Yuan Xiao smiled as he watched her act of not being shy with strangers. Then, Gu Shengyin once again struggled to bite the pen. With the movement of the pen tip, the two crooked words, Qing Bo, finally took shape. Qing Bo. Yuan Xiao softly read it twice and looked at Gu Shengyin. "Is this your name?" Gu Shengyin nodded her head vigorously. Yuan Xiao looked at her pair of watery eyes and couldn't help but reach out his hand to touch them. "I wonder who gave you such a name," he muttered in a low voice. Gu Shengyin blinked her eyes. No one gave her a name. From the moment she could remember, she knew that she was called Qing Bo. Yuan Xiao looked at Gu Shengyin with a complicated expression. Of course, he knew that it was impossible for ordinary beasts to enter Lotus City. Even if there was, it couldn't be this little fox. With just one look, Yuan Xiao knew that this was a demonic beast that hadn't grown up yet. To be able to enter Lotus City, one must have been recognized by the Lotus Platform sect. But logically speaking, it was not good for him to get close to this little fellow. After all, although the little fox had not transformed, her intelligence was no different from that of an ordinary child. Benefactor Little Fox was just like a little girl. How could he, a monk, have the nerve to get close to her? But looking at Gu Shengyin lying softly on her body with a look of dependence, Yuan Xiao felt that she was thinking too much. Qing Bo was just a human child. What could she know? As long as his mind was calm, why would he bother to be disturbed by these factors? Therefore, he convinced himself to keep Gu Shengyin by his side. Gu Shengyin liked the feeling of watching him quietly as his lover. Not long after, all the disciples of the Lotus Platform sect knew that there was an extremely beautiful and intelligent little fox by martial uncle Yuan Xiao's side. That little fox was not raised by martial uncle Yuan Xiao. Instead, it ran over from the outside. Every time martial uncle Yuan Xiao meditated and chanted, she would lie there to accompany him. Occasionally, she would shake her head along with the sound of the wooden fish, as if she could understand it. Gu Shengyin quickly won the hearts of all the disciples of the Lotus Platform sect. The world was more tolerant of beautiful things. Not to mention, Gu Shengyin's current appearance was not only beautiful, but also very innocent and harmless. Gu Shengyin also learned a lot about her lover during this period of time. For example, although Yuan Xiao was young, he was the disciple of the Lotus Platform sect's guardian elder, Venerable Jing Ming. Venerable Jing Ming's seniority was one generation higher than the sect master, Venerable Yuan De. Therefore, Yuan Xiao's status in the Lotus Platform sect was considered to be extraordinary. Yuan Xiao's comprehension of Buddhism was also extremely high. Even the sect master, Venerable Yuan De, personally admitted that in terms of comprehension, he could not compare to this little junior brother. However, no one knew why martial uncle Yuan Xiao had not shaved his head for so many years even though he lived in the Lotus Platform sect. Therefore, strictly speaking, Yuan Xiao was not a true monk. He could only be considered a lay disciple of Buddhism. Chapter 8:27. After Yuan Xiao finished his evening lesson, he packed up and walked out of the door. The Lotus Pedestal sect was very quiet at night. The Buddhist disciples usually had a good schedule and most of them were ready to sleep at this time. Yuan Xiao came to the door of his master, Venerable Jing Ming's room. Master. The door was opened and Yuan Xiao walked in. Venerable Jing Ming sat on a praying mat. There was another praying mat in front of him. Yuan Xiao went forward and sat down. Master, can I shave my head? Yuan Xiao did not know how many times he had asked this question. Venerable Jing Ming was thin and his face was very peaceful. He looked at his little disciple lovingly. He was also the disciple that he was most satisfied with and worried about. Yuan Xiao, I've told you before that you're not suitable to cultivate Buddhism. You have the roots of love that have lasted for many generations. In every lifetime, there must be someone who loves you wholeheartedly waiting for you. It's not necessarily a good thing to enter Buddhism. Yuan Xiao's expression did not change. But Master, after so many years, I've never met anyone who's moved my heart. Venerable Jing Ming said, You have the roots of wisdom and amazing talent. That's why I couldn't bear to see your talent buried, so I brought you to the Lotus Pedestal sect. However, I can't let you shave your head. Yuan Xiao looked at him with his eyes wide open. Venerable Jing Ming sighed. If you shave your head, your six senses will really be pure in the future and you'll be cut off from the mortal world. We Buddhists pay attention to fate. We can't be evil people who ruin marriage. Yuan Xiao laughed softly. Only Master, and only the Lotus Pedestal sect, would say something like that to me. If it were any other Buddhist sect, they would have brought such a talented bodhisattva back to the sect immediately to shave his head and make him a monk who serves Buddha wholeheartedly. Venerable Jing Ming put his palms together and chanted Amitabha. Those who walk different paths cannot work together. The Lotus Pedestal sect has its own principles of doing things. Yuan Xiao also chanted Buddha's name in a low voice. He saw that his master had already closed his eyes and left with his head lowered. After Yuan Xiao left, Venerable Jing Ming's tightly shut eyes opened. He looked worriedly in the direction of his disciple's departure and muttered, You don't just have the roots of love. In this life, I'm afraid there will be a love tribulation. The next day, when Gu Shengyin arrived at the Lotus Pedestal sect, she did not discover that Yuan Xiao was different from usual. She continued to lie beside him, watching him meditate, recite sutras, and recite the Dharma. To Gu Shengyin, these things were really boring. She didn't know how he was able to recite them day after day. However, Gu Shengyin tilted his head and looked at Yuan Xiao's delicate and soft side profile. His little monk was so good-looking. Sure enough, he looked better with his hair. Although she did not know why Yuan Xiao had not shaved her head, Gu Shengyin was happy about it. It was good that she did not shave her head. If she did not shave her head, she would not be a real Buddhist disciple. When the time came, it would not be considered a violation of the precepts. Yuan Xiao tilted her head and saw the little fox staring at her without blinking. He wondered what he would be like in a fox's world. He laughed at his strange thought. However, his mind was attracted by that pair of green eyes. What a beautiful pair of eyes! He wondered what Qingba would look like after she took human form. A woman with such a pair of beautiful eyes must be a beautiful woman, right? Chapter 828. His heart was suddenly in a mess. He recalled what his master, Venerable Jing Ming, had said to him last night. In your body, there are roots of love that have been planted for many generations. In this lifetime, there will definitely be someone who loves you wholeheartedly waiting for you. What would she look like if there was someone who loves her wholeheartedly? His heart, which had always been calm like an ancient well, was thrown into chaos just like that. When Yuan Xiao realized what he was thinking, he hurriedly lowered his head and chanted the name of Buddha several times. It seemed that his state of mind was still not calm enough. He had actually been provoked by this kind of thing. He suddenly didn't dare to look into Gu Shengyin's eyes. Right now, Qingbo was just like a child. How could he associate her with that kind of thing? He forced himself to remain calm and turned to speak to Gu Shengyin. Qingba, I have something to do. Can you go back first today? Gu Shengyin was somewhat puzzled. She called out to Yuan Xiao in confusion. After so many days of interaction, Yuan Xiao could basically understand the meaning behind her call. Only this time, Yuan Xiao didn't know how to explain it to her. Seeing the little white fox standing there with a puzzled expression and unwilling to leave, he stretched out his sleeve. Gu Shengyin only felt a gentle breeze blowing over her body. Then, in the next second, she was standing outside the door. Yuan Xiao's door was already tightly shut. Gu Shengyin was dumbfounded. All right, could something really have happened to him? Gu Shengyin wasn't really a child. She wouldn't get angry because of this and obediently ran back. She would go see what was wrong with him tomorrow. Gu Shengyin thought so. However, she didn't go to the Lotus Pedestal sect the next day. The reason was that this body seemed to be about to awaken. She slept in a daze at night. Suddenly, her body began to heat up. Was this about the time of the 100-year awakening? Gu Shengyin immediately woke up. Chaotic spiritual energy was scattered in the room. Yun Shu and Bodhi Nani were also startled awake. Yun Shu looked worriedly at the situation in front of him. Qingba, what's going on? Bodhi Nani was, after all, experienced and knowledgeable. She roughly understood what was going on. She pulled back Yun Shu, who was about to rush forward in a panic. She's about to transform. Don't rush forward. Transformation. Yun Shu's eyes lit up. However, Bodhi Granny frowned. The commotion in front of her seemed a little too big. Was such a violent spiritual energy really something that a little demon who had just transformed could possess? She had never been able to tell what Qing Bo's bloodline was. She had even guessed that it was the powerful six-tailed fox bloodline of the fox race, but at this moment, she was unsure. At the next moment, a stream of white light flew out from Gu Shengyin's body, forming a phantom image in midair. Bodhi Granny's eyes suddenly widened. At the same time, the sound of rolling thunder came from the sky. Bodhi Granny made a prompt decision. Her figure flashed, and in this small courtyard, a huge Bodhi tree that was more than 100 feet tall broke out of the ground. At the same time, a misty green halo scattered from the Bodhi tree, forming a translucent light shield that protected the entire courtyard. Boom! The huge thunderbolt landed on the light shield. There seemed to be ripples on the light shield, but it remained majestic and unmoving. Bodhi Granny, who had reverted to her original form, was still holding Yun Shu's hand. She looked at the phantom image that emerged from Gu Shengyin's body in shock. She didn't expect that Qing Bo's bloodline was not the six-tailed fox she had imagined. Instead, it was one of the most noble bloodlines of the demon race, the nine-tailed celestial fox bloodline that only existed in legends. Chapter 829. The nine-tailed celestial fox was another name for the nine-tailed Arctic fox. It was also the demon clan's honorific for the nine-tailed Arctic fox. The figure in the air was the nine-tailed Arctic fox's Dharma form. Her body quietly stopped in mid-air, and the 9 huge fluffy tails behind her slowly danced. The little white fox on the bed suddenly let out a pained cry. At the same time, the figure trembled slightly, and the eyes that had been tightly shut suddenly opened. When Bodhi Granny met those eyes, her body couldn't help but tremble. She forcibly suppressed the urge to kneel and lowered her head to look at Yun Shu, whose face had already turned pale. A wave of vital essence was transmitted through their clasped hands, and Yun Shu's complexion finally looked better. The nine-tailed Arctic fox had the same jade eyes as the little white fox on the bed. However, Qing Bo's eyes were incomparably beautiful. However, this pair of jade eyes was extremely beautiful, and contained endless loftiness and allure. One look was enough to make people sink. Bodhi Granny felt that if she hadn't been immersed in the Dharma all year round, she was afraid that she would have fallen for such a pair of eyes. Her hands that were hidden in her sleeves had already secretly formed a seal. This was her body's automatic reaction when facing a powerful opponent. At the same time, many people in Lotus City were attracted by the abnormal astronomical phenomenon. When they saw where the phenomenon came from and saw Bodhi Granny's true body revealed, they all expressed their understanding. Bodhi Granny's cultivation has improved again, right? I see that the thunderbolt is very powerful. Bodhi Granny must have a great breakthrough. Many people had envious looks on their faces as they sighed. This was also the reason why Bodhi Granny had released her true body at the first moment. She had many ways to resist the power of the thunderbolt, but she had chosen the method that consumed the most vital essence. Although the nine-tailed Arctic fox was the demon clan's supreme bloodline, not all demon clans were willing to have such a king appear out of nowhere. Before Qing Bo had enough power to protect herself, it was best not to expose her identity in front of others. The pressure in the room grew stronger and stronger. Even with Bodhi Granny's protection, Yun Shu's face was already abnormally red. After all, she was too young and her cultivation was too weak. The pressure of the nine-tailed Arctic fox's bloodline, even if it was just an illusory image, was not something she could withstand. At this moment, the white fox's 9 huge tails, and the leftmost tail slowly solidified. Bodhi Granny moved her hand, and Yun Shu's figure disappeared from the room. In the next moment, she appeared under the tall Bodhi tree in the courtyard. A Bodhi tree emitted a green halo, silently protecting her. In the room, Bodhi Granny quietly watched the white fox condense the first of its 9 tails. The 9-tailed Arctic fox's Arctic fox Dharma was, and the 9-tailed white Arctic fox's Arctic fox's Arctic fox's Dharma, and Arctic fox white Arctic fox's white Arctic fox white. At the same time, the little white fox's body gradually changed. Its small body gradually elongated, and the figure of an adult woman appeared in front of Bodhi Granny's eyes. Looking at that face and those eyes, even Bodhi Granny couldn't help but gasp. Looking back with a smile, she was a beauty that could cause the fall of a city. No wonder, no matter what kind of rumors, the 9-tailed Arctic fox was a femme fatale who could bring disaster to the world. Chapter 830. Gu Shengyin opened her eyes and suddenly realized that her body had changed. She raised her left hand and saw a flawless human palm that was as white as jade. Did she transform? Gu Shengyin looked at Bodhi Granny, who was standing at the side and looking at her with a complicated expression. She stood up and bowed to her. Thank you, Granny, for covering Qing Bo up. Although she had been lying on the bed, a trace of her consciousness had been attached to her Dharma form. Naturally, she had seen Bodhi Granny release her true form to conceal her from the heavens. However, Bodhi Granny had turned sideways to avoid this bow. Miss Qing Bo, no one in the demon clan can accept this bow of yours. Bodhi Granny's words were sincere. The demon clan valued their bloodline. As a 9-tailed Arctic fox, Qing Bo was fully deserving of the title of Highness in the demon clan. After saying that, she paused for a moment and looked at Gu Shengyin seriously. But Miss Qing Bo, it's best that you don't reveal your identity now. Gu Shengyin knew that Bodhi Granny was sincerely thinking for her sake. She nodded and thanked her again. Bodhi Granny saw that she was fine and said, "My true form has attracted a lot of attention. Since you're fine, I'll take it back." Yun Shu only ran in after the huge Bodhi tree disappeared from the courtyard. She was stunned when she saw Gu Shengyin. "Qing Bo, you're so beautiful." She was prettier than all the demons and humans she had ever seen combined. Gu Shengyin couldn't help but smile when she heard this simple and straightforward praise. Her face could be said to be extremely beautiful. When she smiled, it was as if 100 flowers had bloomed. Yun Shu's attention, which had just been pulled back with great difficulty, was once again attracted by her. Yun Shu only felt that Qing Bo's melting technique seemed to have a strange charm. She couldn't help what? She only stared blankly at Gu Shengyin without saying a word. Bodhi Granny sighed helplessly and raised her hand to gently pat Yun Shu's head. Then he turned to Gu Shengyin and said, "Miss, you've just transformed, so I'm afraid you won't be able to control the natural charm of the 9-tailed Arctic fox. It's best that you don't go out for the next few days. Wait until you've familiarized yourself with the changes in your body and can control yourself before going out. Otherwise, it would cause a lot of trouble." Gu Shengyin also noticed that something was wrong with her. She nodded and said, Don't worry, Nanny. I know what to do. Yun Shu was still staring blankly at Gu Shengyin as she stood up and walked towards the door. Her white dress was automatically transformed when she transformed. It was hard to tell what style it was, but Yun Shu felt that it was very elegant and beautiful. But this was nothing compared to the way she walked. The wind blew the willows, and the willows swayed in the wind. For some reason, Yun Shu recalled a few scripts she had read when she was in that small human town. Her delicate steps were incomparably exquisite. In the past, she couldn't imagine what it would be like until she saw Qing Bo today. Gu Shengyin had been staying in the courtyard for the past few days. Bodhi Granny was right. She had just transformed, so she couldn't control the natural charm of the nine-tailed Arctic fox. When she saw Yun Shu unconsciously being affected by her own aura, she knew. At the very least, she had to be able to control it freely before she could go out. Otherwise, as Bodhi Granny said, it would cause bad consequences. In addition, after her awakening, the unique cultivation method of the nine-tailed Arctic fox clan appeared in her mind. She had to organize it properly. Chapter 831. By the time Gu Shengyin came out of her little seclusion, 10 days had already passed. She pushed open the door to the courtyard and Yun Shu ran over immediately. She looked at Qing Bo. Qing Bo was still so good-looking. However, the feeling that made people unable to control themselves when they saw him was gone. Bodhi Nanny did not expect Gu Shengyin to come out so quickly. She thought that Gu Shengyin would take at least a month. Was she really a nine-tailed Arctic fox? How could his talent be so shocking? Gu Shengyin felt that she had only sat for a while and 10 days had passed. Time passed so quickly that it was frightening. She really wanted to see Yuan Xiu now. She had not gone to look for him for 10 days. Would he be worried? No, Buddhist cultivators had always been indifferent. She did not know if he still remembered her. Gu Shengyin thought for a while. After saying a few words to Yun Shu and Bodhi Granny, she turned back into a little white fox and walked on the familiar path. Yun Shu did not feel that anything was wrong, but Bodhi Granny was stunned when she heard that Gu Shengyin was going to the Lotus Pedestal sect to look for a little monk. She had a deep relationship with the Lotus Pedestal sect and could be considered half a guardian. Naturally, she knew some things very well. For example, Venerable Jing Ming's disciple, Yuan Xiu, had not shaved his head because he was not pure of love. Now that a nine-tailed Arctic fox had turned into Qing Bo and ran into the Lotus Pedestal sect, she could not help but think. With Qing Bo's appearance, even a naturally emotionless Buddha would not be able to remain unmoved, right? She was in a daze for a long time before she finally sighed. It was all fate. What was the use of thinking so much? Lotus Pedestal sect. Yuan Xiu was meditating in his room. The wooden fish was knocked again and again, but his heart was not as calm as usual. 10 days. Today was the 11th day. Benefactor Little Fox had not appeared outside his room for 10 whole days. That day, he sent Benefactor Little Fox away because his heart was in a mess. Demons were all sentient, so was the little fox benefactor angry? She was angry, so she didn't want to talk to him anymore? Did that mean that she would never come back again? The sound of the wooden fish, which had been steadily striking in the room, suddenly became disordered, just like Yuan Xiu's flawless state of mind. Da-da-da. The door was suddenly knocked a few times. The sound of the wooden fish stopped. Yuan Xiu could recognize this voice. The disciples of the sect would not knock on the door like this. He slowly turned his head, and the door just happened to open a crack. A familiar white ball squeezed in. Gu Shengyin looked up and saw the smile on Yuan Xiu's face. It was like a gentle breeze blowing through the clear water, creating a circle of gentle ripples. Benefactor Little Fox, you're here. It was as if those 10 days had never appeared. Every time Gu Shengyin appeared, she would appear. Yuan Xiu greeted her with a smile. He knew that her name was Qing Bo, but he always liked to call her Little Fox Benefactor. Little monk, I'm much older than you. You have no respect for your elders. Gu Shengyin snorted softly. Yuan Xiao was stunned by the sweet and crisp voice. He looked at Gu Shengyin carefully and said, "Congratulations, benefactor little fox." Gu Shengyin snorted. "I told you that my name is Qing Bo, don't call me little fox." Yuan Xiao readily followed her advice. "Benefactor Qing Bo, this little monk's Buddhist name is Yuan Xiao. So, don't call him little monk." Gu Shengyin understood what he meant. Seeing that he was still studying the Buddhist Dharma, he walked to his side, leaped lightly, and lay on top of him. This time, Yuan Xiao's body froze for a moment. Chapter 832. He knew that something was different. In the past, the little fox, benefactor Qing Bo, had gained intelligence but could not speak. He could still tell himself to treat her purely as a sentient animal. But now, benefactor Qing Bo had obviously made a great breakthrough and could speak. She should be able to successfully transform in the future. Listening to her soft and sweet voice, she was obviously a girl. But now, she was still lying on top of him as usual. Wasn't that a little wrong? Yuan Xiao was a little distressed. It seemed that he should avoid it. Gu Shengyin certainly sensed the change in him and could roughly guess what he was thinking. This was also the reason why she did not tell him that she could transform into a human. Although she did not shave, Yuan Xiao had cultivated the habits of a Buddhist disciple in the Lotus Platform sect. If he knew that she could transform into a girl, he would definitely not dare to let her get close to him. How could Gu Shengyin allow this to happen? She said lazily, "Yuan Xiao, are you feeling very uncomfortable right now?" Yuan Xiao didn't expect Gu Shengyin to be so direct. He put his palms together and chanted a Buddhist mantra in a low voice. "Benefactor Qingbo, there are clear rules in Buddhism. Our disciples are not allowed to get close to women." Gu Shengyin interrupted him. "Can I be considered a woman in my current form?" Yuan Xiao answered instinctively, "Benefactor Qingbo, you should be able to transform in no time." Gu Sheng yawned lazily and said, "I'm just a straight white fox. You can just treat me as a fox too." Buddhist disciple, you are so pretentious. Was this how pretentious was used? Yuan Xiao did not know whether to laugh or cry. But after thinking for a while, he lowered his head and said, "Amitba, benefactor Qing Bo is very right. I have learned from you." He would just treat benefactor Qing Bo as a little fox. On this day, with Gu Shengyin's company, Yuan Xiao practiced Buddhism for a whole day without any distracting thoughts. Before Gu Shengyin left at night, she hesitated for a moment and said to Yuan Xiao, "Yuan Xiao, I might not be able to come every day in the future. Don't be surprised if you don't see me." She was about to officially start cultivating and couldn't be as idle as before. The smile on Yuan Xiao's lips froze for a moment before she revealed an even gentler smile. "I understand, benefactor Qingbo." Gu Shengyin glanced at him again. She seemed to be afraid that he would think too much and said, "But don't worry, Yuan Xiao. Even if I can't come every day, I will still think of you. You're so pretty. You're my favorite." Yuan Xiao couldn't help but laugh out loud. She nodded again. "I understand, benefactor Qingbo." He watched as the white ball walked further and further away until it disappeared from his sight. He closed the door and sat down again. In front of him was a line of words on the Buddhist scripture. "Saraira, form is not different from emptiness, emptiness is not different from form. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form." He gently closed his eyes and recited the words silently. He ignored the trace of delusion in his heart. Gu Shengyin walked out of the Lotus Pedestal sect in a good mood. The words she said before she left were no doubt said deliberately for Yuan Xiao to hear. As an active and passionate demon, how could she be reserved in front of the person she liked? If it wasn't for the fact that she was afraid of scaring the pure and simple little monk, she would have said something even more explicit. "Forget it, let's take it slow. After all, the little monk couldn't run away." Chapter 833. Gu Shengyin was right. She began to run out of time. She had to work hard to cultivate and improve her strength as soon as possible. Although it was very safe in Lotus City, she couldn't stay here for the rest of her life and wait for death, could she? She was a nine-tailed Arctic fox, born with a noble bloodline. It didn't allow her to be a cowardly demon. In the demon clan, one's bloodline determined one's strength. After her awakening, there was the most suitable cultivation method for the nine-tailed Arctic fox clan in her inherited memory. Unlike the human clan, who had barriers in every small realm, she could reach the highest realm without any bottlenecks and ascend to become an immortal as long as she continued to cultivate. Although Gu Shangyin missed her lover, she had never forgotten the big threat of the Heartless Nun. As long as she was around, the demon clan, especially those ordinary demons with average strength, had to live in fear all day long. Gu Shangyin once asked the system why the demon clan's powerful figures didn't kill the Heartless Nun. The system's answer made him sigh. The demon clan was not united. There were powerful demons, but they each occupied one side and were wary of each other. The Heartless Nun was powerful and had many treasures on her. It would take a lot of effort to kill her, and it was likely that they would face the crazy revenge of the Watermoon sect. Moreover, the demon clan was cold-blooded. Those demons with noble bloodlines didn't have any feelings for their fellow demons who died at the hands of the Heartless Nun. No one was willing to take a big risk to kill her as long as it didn't infringe on their interests. Gu Shangyin sneered. They were overcautious, selfish, without courage, and in a state of disunity. This was the reason why there hadn't been a unified demon king in the demon clan for so many years. This was also the reason why the demon clan had been suppressed by the human clan even though they had a natural talent, bloodline, and lifespan advantage over the human clan. She retracted her thoughts. These were still too far away from her current self. The more time she spent on cultivation, the less time she had to find Yuan Xiao. Yuan Xiao found that his heart couldn't calm down. Every morning, after his morning class, he would prick up his ears and listen to the door to see if there was that familiar knocking sound. If not, he would sit quietly on the futon for a while, and then silently begin to cultivate. His dharma did not fall, but his state of mind was no longer as pure as before. Yuan Xiao knew that a little fox had quietly crawled onto her originally clear and empty spiritual altar. After the morning class, the little white ball came to his room as promised. He would smile and greet her. Then, the two of them would have a tacit understanding. One of them would silently cultivate dharma, while the other would lie on top of him and sleep. Or, she would look at him with her mysterious and beautiful eyes. The emotions of the demon race were usually passionate and straightforward. From time to time, Benefactor Qing Bo would say things like, "Yuan Xiao, you're so pretty. I like you the most," and so on. At first, Yuan Xiao would feel a little uncomfortable or embarrassed from being teased. But now he could easily reply, "Yuan Xiao's whole body can't compare to Benefactor Qing Bo's pair of eyes." His words were meant to refute, but they were also sincere. Benefactor Qing Bo's pair of eyes was indeed the most beautiful pair of eyes he had ever seen in his life. Chapter 834. Benefactor Qing Bo had not been here for half a month. Yuan Xiao looked at the scriptures in front of him and sighed inwardly. Even though he had mentioned it before, Benefactor Qing Bo had only been away for 5 days at most. He did not know what had happened to her. Venerable Jing Ming had looked for Yuan Xiao once. "Your heart is in a mess," Venerable Jing Ming said to him. Yuan Xiao admitted without hesitation, "This disciple's heart is not calm." Venerable Jing Ming did not ask for the reason. He had always allowed this disciple of his to decide the path he wanted to take in the future. He could resolve his doubts countless times, but he could not decide the path he wanted to take in the future. Moreover, this disciple was not supposed to be a Buddhist in the first place. Yuan Xiao walked out of his room and looked up at the moon in the sky. It was close to the middle of the moon. The moon was very far away, and a hazy layer of clear moonlight spilled over the courtyard. He could not help but think that if this gentle moonlight shone on Qing Bo's body, it would definitely look very beautiful with her snow-white and flawless fur. In Bodhi Nani's small courtyard, Gu Shengyin finally opened her eyes. After her pair of dark green eyes opened, they slowly turned into the black of an ordinary person's eyes. She pushed open the window and saw the big round moon outside at a glance. Before she went into seclusion, it was still a crescent moon. She finally understood the saying that cultivation had no concept of time. Bang! Yun Shu excitedly pushed open the door to her room. Gu Shengyin looked at her in surprise. Yun Shu was usually gentle and quiet. Why was she so happy today? Yun Shu looked at Gu Shengyin and said, "Qingbo, tomorrow is the day of the Moon Lantern Festival. Bodhi Nanny said that she allowed me to go out and play." Looking at Yun Shu's sparkling eyes, Gu Shengyin could not help but laugh. Unlike her, Bodhi Nanny looked gentle, but she was very strict with Yun Shu. She usually restrained her to cultivate properly and did not let her take a single step outside. Every time this little girl saw her return from outside, her face would be filled with envy. Moon Lantern Festival? Gu Shengyin's heart skipped a beat. The next day, Gu Shengyin accompanied Yun Shu to play outside during the day. However, the most fun part of the Lantern Festival was at night. Unfortunately, Gu Shengyin could not accompany Yun Shu. "Have fun by yourself. I have something to do." To avoid attracting attention, Gu Shengyin did not even transform into her human form. Instead, she remained in her fox form and allowed Yun Shu to carry her. Yun Shu expressed her understanding. If Qingbo were to transform into a human, the people on the street would probably not look at the lanterns anymore. Hearing Gu Shengyin say that she was leaving, Yun Shu was obviously a little disappointed. However, she had always been considerate and didn't say much. Her little appearance made Gu Shengyin feel pity for her. She reached out to rub Yun Shu's head and said, "I'll personally talk to Bodhi Nanny another day and bring you out to play for a day. How about that?" Yun Shu's eyes lit up when she heard this, but she still shook her head. "I think it's better. Nanny said that I have to cultivate properly so that I won't be a burden to you in the future." How could she be so obedient and cute? Gu Shengyin had no resistance to this kind of little girl. She said to Yun Shu, "Cultivation can't be rushed." "It's settled then. I'll talk to Bodhi Nanny." She looked at the sky and knew that it was time for her to leave. Otherwise, Yuan Xiao would be having dinner and preparing for her evening class. Gu Shengyin said goodbye to Yun Shu and ran towards the Lotus Pedestal sect. She arrived just in time. Yuan Xiao had just finished dinner and was preparing for her evening class. "Yuan Xiao." A clear and pleasant voice came from outside the door. Gu Shengyin did not knock this time. Yuan Xiao paused. Was she hallucinating? Why did she hear benefactor Qingbo's voice at this time? Chapter 835. Yuan Xiao. Gu Shengyin didn't hear a reply from inside and thought that there was no one inside. She stretched out her hand and was about to push the door open. Unexpectedly, the door opened from the inside. Yuan Xiao stood at the door and looked at her in surprise. "Benefactor Qingbo, why are you? Why did you come over at this time?" Gu Shengyin jumped into his arms easily. Yuan Xiao hugged her out of reflex. "Today is a good day. I came out especially to play with you." Yuan Xiao counted the days and suddenly realized that today was the annual Lunar Lantern Festival. He was a little embarrassed. "Benefactor Qingbo, I still have evening classes to do." Gu Shengyin stretched out her hand and patted his arm gently. "You can always take a break once a year, right? I have never seen what the Lunar Lantern Festival is like. I heard from others that the Lantern Festival is for the people you like the most. That's why I'm here to look for you. Benefactor Qingbo." Even though he was used to Gu Shengyin's confession from time to time, Yuan Xiao's face couldn't help but blush when he heard such words at this time. Gu Shengyin loved to see him like this. It was really rare to see such a gentle and innocent lover. She purposely added, "If you're still unwilling, I'll find someone else." Before she could finish her sentence, she felt the arm that was hugging her tighten. Yuan Xiao's gentle voice came from above. "Benefactor Qingbo, Please allow me to change my clothes. Change his clothes. Gu Shengyin was put down. She was ready to admire the picture of a handsome man taking off his clothes with great interest. However, Yuan Xiu didn't move for a long time. Gu Shengyin was puzzled. Yuan Xiu looked at the little white fox's eyes and said helplessly, "Benefactor Qingba, can you please turn around?" Gu Shengyin pretended not to hear. She seemed to hear Yuan Xiu sigh. Then, a green cloud fell from the sky and covered Gu Shengyin completely. It was Yuan Xiu's green monk robe. There was a very light sandalwood scent on his clothes, which was different from the lotus scent on Yuan Xiu's body. This was the scent of his body. It was as if that lotus fragrance would only appear on his body. As for other things, even the most intimate clothing, they would not be tainted in the slightest. Gu Shengyin didn't dislike the smell. On the contrary, she felt that it was easy to fall asleep just by smelling it. However, the current situation still annoyed her. Because she was covered by a piece of cloth, she couldn't see anything. Not only did she fail to get out, but she also often tripped over herself. When Gu Shengyin finally realized that she was not a real fox, but a demon who knew magic, Yuan Xiu had already taken the monk's robe off her body. "This is an urgent matter. Benefactor Qingba, I apologize for offending you just now." Yuan Xiu's face was full of apology. Gu Shengyin did not pay attention to this. She raised her head and looked at Yuan Xiu, who had changed into ordinary clothes. He took off his monk's robe and changed into a blue robe. It wasn't made of expensive material, but when he wore it, it gave him a leisurely demeanor. His unshaven hair was tied up with a jade hairpin. A few strands of hair casually fell to the side of his face, adding a touch of elegance to his jade-like face. Some people needed to use luxurious clothes to show their charm, while others could wear ordinary clothes to show the bearing of a prince. Yuan Xiu was the latter. Gu Shengyin suddenly said, "I remember there's a clear pond over there. It's full of lotus flowers. Let's go there and have a look." Yuan Xiu looked in the direction she was pointing at. It was dark and gloomy. It was obviously not lively there at all. Even the lanterns were much fewer than in other places. As long as the little fox was happy, it was fine. He walked in that direction. The place was very quiet. There was a pavilion beside the clear pond. 2 lanterns were hung at the corner of the pavilion, providing the only light in the place. The night breeze brought with it the unique fragrance of lotus flowers. Yuan Xiu only felt relaxed and happy. He didn't know why there was no one in such a wonderful place. "Close your eyes," Gu Shengyin suddenly said. Chapter 837. Yuan Xiu didn't know what the little fox wanted to do, so he closed his eyes. Then, he felt an emptiness in his arms. His fingers unconsciously bent, as if he wasn't used to it. "All right, Yuan Xiu, open your eyes." He opened his eyes. In front of him was still the same dark pavilion. Where was the little fox? "I'm over here." A soft voice came from behind him. Yuan Xiu's heart skipped a beat. He felt that something was wrong. He turned around, and his eyes suddenly widened. In the night wind, under the reflection of the lotus flowers in the pond, there was a slim and elegant beauty, holding a lantern and smiling. The night wind blew her thin skirt, as if it would be blown away by the wind in the next moment. At this moment, the beauty was looking at him with a smile. "This handsome young master, I have a lantern in my hand. Would you be willing to give it to me?" In her hand, there was a lantern that had appeared in her hand at some unknown time. Yuan Xiu looked at the woman in front of him, who was so beautiful that she didn't seem like an ordinary person. He only felt that a certain emptiness in his heart had quietly been filled. He slowly revealed a smile. This young monk is honored to have the benefactress's favor. He slowly walked forward and reached out to take the lantern that swayed unsteadily in the night wind. Gu Shengyin looked up and rolled her eyes at him. "Young monk?" Are you really planning to become a monk? Yuan Xiao shook his head and smiled. It's a habit that has been cultivated for many years. It's hard to change it in a short period of time. He looked at Gu Shengyin beside him with joy and curiosity. Master was talking about the root of love that he had planted for many generations, the person he loved wholeheartedly. Was that benefactress Qingbo? It was no wonder that as soon as he saw her, he felt incomparably close to her. Suddenly, a fragrant wind blew in front of him. Yuan Xiao only felt a burst of soft and fragrant jade suddenly close to his arms. The peerless beauty was very close to him. She whispered in his ear, "Yuan Xiao, did you accept my lantern because of my face?" No matter how calm Yuan Xiao's heart was, when had he ever experienced such a situation? Naturally, his ears were a little red from the heat. He said in a low voice, "Benefactor Qingbo, please do not speak. You must know that beauty is emptiness." Gu Shengyin snickered in her heart. She moved closer to him until their bodies were almost touching. She sensed that his body had stiffened. She wanted to tease him even more. She said with some dissatisfaction, "There are so many girls on the street who want to give you lanterns, but you don't accept them. I'm more beautiful than them, so when I give it to you, you take it. If this isn't because you like my beauty, then what is the reason?" Yuan Xiao still shook her head. "Benefactor Qingba, you are different from them." Gu Shengyin pressed on, "What's the difference?" Yuan Xiao stared blankly for a moment. Suddenly, a thought flashed through her mind. She looked down carefully. Sure enough, he saw a trace of seriousness in the woman's seemingly careless movements. He seemed to have understood something, and his restless heart suddenly calmed down. In this little monk's heart, they are just withered bones and beautiful women. Benefactor Qingbo, on the other hand, is the only color in this little monk's spiritual altar. A faint blush appeared on Gu Shengyin's white jade-like face. This monk was so serious even when he was whispering sweet nothings. However, Yuan Xiao suddenly smiled. He gently reached out his free hand and held Gu Shengyin's hand. "Master once said that I have the roots of love planted over many generations. I have a lover who loves me wholeheartedly. Yuan Xiao is lucky. It seems that I have already found this person." Chapter 838. Gu Shengyin and Yuan Xiao walked around the Moon Lantern Festival together. The only thing that was not harmonious was that during the latter half of the festival, Gu Shengyin appeared in her human form and caused quite a stir in Lotus City. Cultivators were usually more beautiful than mortals. Even if their appearance was not astonishing, after cultivation, they would remove the impurities in their body and reconstruct their foundation. No matter what, there would not be a person with an unsightly appearance. However, even in the cultivation world where beauties were everywhere, Gu Shengyin's appearance was enough to be called the #1 beauty. Although Yuan Xiao's mind was calm, he still felt somewhat helpless when he saw countless people coveting his lover who had just interacted with his mind. He pulled Gu Shengyin to the side and said, "Qingbo, why don't you change back to your original form?" Under Gu Shengyin's insistence, he finally omitted the word benefactor. Gu Shengyin deliberately asked, "Why?" How could Yuan Xiao not know what she was thinking? He followed her heart and admitted, "There are too many people coveting Qingbo. This little monk is afraid that the meditation dharma that I have been cultivating for so many years will lose its effect." Gu Shengyin burst out laughing. No matter what a beauty did, it was beautiful, let alone when she laughed so happily. Yuan Xiao looked at her quietly and thought to himself that he would have to cultivate even more diligently in the future. With such a beauty by his side, it could be imagined that there would be many wild bees and butterflies in the future. Without enough strength, he would not be able to protect her. In the end, Gu Shengyin still changed into her white fox form and was sent back to the small courtyard by Yuan Xiao. "Qingbo lives together with Bodhi Mami?" Yuan Xiao asked in surprise. Gu Shengyin was not surprised that he knew about Bodhi Mami and nodded. Since it was Bodhi Mami, Yuan Xiao decided to pay her a visit. He grew up in the Lotus Pedestal sect and was quite familiar with Bodhi Mami. "Yuan Xiao, As expected, Bodhi Mami was very surprised when she saw Yuan Xiao. Gu Shangyin returned to her human form when she returned to the courtyard. She saw that Yuan Xiao and Bodhi Mami were obviously old acquaintances. She pulled Yuan Xiao into the room and gave them some space to talk. Bodhi Mami was very experienced and knowledgeable. How could she not understand when she saw the two of them like this? It turned out that the root of Yuan Xiao's love was actually Qingbao's. Bodhi Mami had known about this matter all along. Now that it was confirmed, her heart felt at ease. But she still felt a trace of regret when she looked at Yuan Xiao. She was from the Lotus Pedestal sect. Although she had established her own sect, she could still be considered half a guardian of the Lotus Pedestal sect. Naturally, she hoped that the Lotus Pedestal sect would become better and better. Yuan Xiao's aptitude was the best among all the Buddhist disciples she had seen in so many years. She had no doubt that if Yuan Xiao were to devote herself to studying Buddhist doctrine, her achievements would far surpass those of the Lotus Pedestal sect. Couldn't, she could not force S's Mami, S. However, Bodhi Mami had thought it through. This was the Lotus Pedestal sect. If it was like other Buddhist sects, fighting for resources for benefits, it would be no different from other sections. How could it be called the Lotus Pedestal sect? She looked at Yuan Xiao lovingly. I know what happened to you and I won't say anything about it. I only hope that you can find the right person and live happily for the rest of your life. Yuan Xiao put his palms together and bowed to Bodhi Mami. Yuan Xiao knows that she is the one destined for me. Thank you for your blessings. When Gu Shangyin came out, Yuan Xiao had already left the courtyard. Chapter 839. The next day, Yuan Xiao went to find his teacher, Venerable Jingming, and explained the matter between him and Qingbo. Since you've moved your heart, my Lotus Pedestal sect can't keep you. Venerable Jingming sighed. Yuan Xiao bowed and solemnly kowtowed 9 times to Venerable Jingming. That afternoon, he packed his things and left the Lotus Pedestal sect. In Bodhi Nani's small courtyard, there was one more person who often swept the courtyard. Gu Shangyin felt that this kind of life was actually quite good. The years were peaceful. If Nun Wuxin didn't exist, it would be good for her and Yuan Xiao to find a similar place to live a peaceful life. Unfortunately, with her identity in this life, there was no way she could live a peaceful life. There was a rumor that a new king of the demon clan had been born. It was in Lotus City. One word shocked the world. The king of the demon clan wasn't some powerful person, but a unique king. Only a few extremely noble bloodlines could receive this title. No matter which bloodline it was, if she was allowed to grow up, she would be a great threat to everyone. The human cultivators didn't want such a king to appear in the demon clan, and the powerful people of the demon clan also didn't want a king who could unify the demon clan. The thing that Gu Shangyin was worried about still happened. According to the rumor, the future king of the demon clan was in Lotus City. Although there was no way to know whether this news was true or false, Gu Shangyin already knew that many people were secretly rushing to Lotus City. After living here for a period of time, Gu Shangyin already had a good impression of this city. Although the Lotus Pedestal sect was powerful, it was still alone. If someone really came to find trouble, the peaceful days in Lotus City would come to an end. She went to find Bodhi Nani. Bodhi Nani seemed to have expected this. She sighed and said, I guess that you would come to find me soon. Miss Qingbo, it's good for you to leave this place and avoid the limelight. Whether it's for your own sake or for Lotus City's sake. Of course, Gu Shangyin understood this. She was just here to say goodbye to the person who had taken care of her for so long. Walking out of Bodhi Nani's courtyard, she saw Yuan Xiao standing at the side with a smile on his face. He was carrying a small package in his hand. Gu Shangyin stared at him with wide eyes. You? She hadn't had the time to tell Yuan Xiao about this, but from Yuan Xiao's reaction, it was obvious that she knew. Yuan Xiao smiled and said, I was just guessing. I didn't expect it to be true. Yuan Xiao is blessed with the supreme bloodline of the demon race. Gu Shangyin's heart warmed. She whispered, You don't mind? Being with her meant that in the future, he might have to bear great dangers and could no longer live a peaceful life like now. Yuan Xiu didn't answer her question. Instead, he sighed and took 2 steps forward, pulling her into his embrace. I only care if I will be too far away from you in the future and not be worthy of you. A cry of surprise came from the door. Gu Shengyin raised her head from Yuan Xiu's embrace and saw Yun Shu standing at the door of the courtyard, covering her eyes with her white and tender hands. The growth of the demon race was slow. She still looked like a teenager and would look like this for many years to come. Gu Shengyin noticed that she was also carrying a small package on her shoulder. Chapter 840. Gu Shengyin was surprised. Yun Shu, what are you doing? In her opinion, staying in Lotus City and cultivating with Bodhi Nanny was the most suitable path for Yun Shu. Yun Shu giggled and said, I grew up with Qing Bo. Of course, wherever Qing Bo goes, I'll follow. Her world had always been simple. The first creature she saw when she gained sentience was Qing Bo. In Yun Shu's heart, Qing Bo was the closest person to her. Of course, she wanted to be with Qing Bo and never be separated. Gu Shengyin felt her eyes heat up. She looked at Yuan Xiu beside her and then looked at Yun Shu who was not far away. Suddenly, she revealed a smile. Yes. We'll always be together. No one and nothing could separate them. Before the people sent by various forces to gather information arrived, 3 people dressed in low-key clothes had already quietly left Lotus City. Gu Shengyin had taken the appearance-changing pill. Her face was too conspicuous and could easily cause unnecessary trouble. The 3 of them cultivated while changing their residence from time to time. Unexpectedly, more than 10 years passed just like that. Those cultivators and demons went to Lotus City. Most of them were blocked outside by the Lotus Platform Sex Array. After the rest went in, they confirmed that there were no demons with the bloodline of the sovereign stage inside. The crowd did not give up and searched everywhere. After many years of fruitless searching, they slowly put this matter to the back of their minds. Perhaps it was really just a rumor? Otherwise, why was there no additional news after so many years? Nowadays, not many people still cared about this rumor. However, Gu Shengyin and the others were still very careful and did not give themselves away. They had already lived in this town for a year. This place was not big. The cultivators in the entire city were at most in the golden core stage. They were not much of a threat to them. During this period of time, they lived quite leisurely. Gu Shengyin was notified by the system that Nun Wuxin had arrived. She frowned. Wasn't she confined? She still remembered that Nun Wuxin had angered the Lotus Pedestal sect and had been grounded by the sect master of the Water Moon sect. The system replied, she has also been locked up for more than 10 years. Her master loves her disciple dearly, and the Water Moon sect master also felt that after all these years, her temperament should have been smoothed out a bit, so she was released. Temper his temper? Nun Wuxin's hatred for the demon clan had become a kind of morbid obsession. In the cultivation world, it was called a heart demon. In the modern society of the technological era, it was a typical mental illness. Gu Shengyin did not believe that a mere 10 years could change her personality. Sure enough, in less than 10 days, she heard the rumor that the heartless nun had tortured and killed a black bear spirit. Gu Shengyin, Yuan Xiu, and Yun Shu discussed for a while before they decided to leave. With their current strength, although they were not completely powerless against Master Wuxin, they would not be able to gain the upper hand. Needless to say, Gu Shengyin's identity was not suitable to be exposed. However, some people could not be avoided just because you wanted to. Gu Shengyin had clearly followed the route provided by the system and walked in the opposite direction of Master Wuxin's goal, but they still met her. Looking at the black-robed Taoist nun with sharp eyes at the city gate, Gu Shengyin hurriedly pulled Yun Shu into a nearby restaurant. System. She was silent for a moment. What happened to going in the other direction? You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.